One of my favorite Game Boy Color games was a monster collecting RPG from a popular game franchise. The main character was a young boy, cast out into the rugged world of monster collecting, forced to assemble a team that could guide him through the unforgiving terrain of an unfamiliar land. Did you guess it? Nope, it's not Pokemon, it's Dragon Warrior Monsters, a spin-off of Square Enix's Dragon Quest series. I had hours of fun with this game when I was younger. So, when I heard about the contest, I figured now was the perfect time to reacquaint myself with this bit of nostalgia. You play as Terry, child version of the hero from the main Dragon Quest series, on a quest to save his sister Milayu. Terry journeys to the mystical land of Great Tree, where he learns that if he wins the Starry Night tournament, he will be reunited with his abducted sister. The tournament's for monsters only, though, meaning that unlike in some Dragon Quest games where you fight alongside a team of monsters, here you merely oversee them. And with that, your quest is set. In order to build your monster team, you'll have to step through one of the Traveler's Gates and explore the wilderness. Journeying in the wilderness plays a lot like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. You find yourself on a floor with a randomly generated map. Your goal is to find the portal that takes you to the next floor, and eventually to reach the boss monster. Along the way, you'll collect items and have random encounters with hostile monsters. If you're looking for new additions to your team, you can try and catch one of these monsters. And that's perhaps where you'll encounter your first frustration. The capture rates are very low. With the exception of your first time through the Gate of Beginners, and a few select bosses, you'll find that the monsters rarely join you without persuasion. To get a monster to join you, you not only have to make sure it's the last in its group to be knocked out, but you also have to give it some meat. In theory, all cuts of meat increase the chance that a monster will join you, but I've found that even among the low-level monsters, you don't see any noticeable difference unless you spring for the expensive types of meat, ribs and sirloins, and it'll be quite a while before you can afford to splurge on those. For a game of its time, having 195 different monsters to collect is none too shabby, and it's impressive how they distributed them so that each gate has its own set of unique monsters. Compare that to the first two generations of Pokemon, where you see the same birds, rodents, and bugs over and over again in the first few areas. The monsters are divided into 10 different families, each with its own strengths and weaknesses, but within each family there's plenty of variation. Very often you'll find it to be the case that two monsters from the same family have completely different spells and abilities. The designs are very creative, and each monster truly feels unique. I felt like a kid on Christmas morning every time a new gate opened up. I was genuinely interested in seeing what new strange creatures awaited. To expand your range of potential monsters, you can also breed the ones you have. You can breed any two monsters, provided they're of the opposite sex. The offspring will get greater stat increases with each level up, and have a higher maximum level than its parents. Best of all, it can learn all the skills its parents knew, bar none. But if you're looking to get a specific monster out of breeding, that's where things get difficult. Believe me, the recipes for the rare monsters are not something you can intuit. For example, would you have guessed that this Roboster was made by mating a unicorn with a Saberman? Oh, happy dagger indeed. But here's the real kicker. When you breed two monsters, not only do the parents disappear, but the game autosaves immediately afterwards. I'm not too big to admit this. I used a strategy guide regularly when it came to breeding, because with those kind of stakes, there was really no room for error. And some of the breeding chains were so complicated that I'd have to map out these huge family trees in Inspiration just to keep everything straight. And that Roboster recipe I mentioned? That was just one small brick in the wall. But breeding isn't without its rewards. You'll find that because of their level limits, monsters you catch in the wild just won't be strong enough to carry you through the whole game. That monster I showed you at the very top of the family tree turned out to be a real juggernaut and a vital asset to my team. As is standard in RPGs, there's a variety of spells and attacks that your monsters can learn. My favorite is a spell called Explode Bit. Explode Bit is the third and final form of a spell that starts out as Bang and later becomes Boom. Bang and Boom are both feeble and pathetic, but once the spell becomes Explode Bit, It can devastate 3 sturdy monsters with a single hit. Having a monster on your team that knows Explode Bit is a real testament to patience and perseverance. And not to mention the fact that your monster is casting an explosion in your enemy's face. I mean, come on, how could that not be anybody's favorite spell? Now, I've been holding off on talking about the battle system because, well, I'm not sure whether or not you'll like it. The basics are what you'd expect from an RPG. Monster with the highest agility goes first, special skills cost MP to use, and once a monster runs out of HP, it faints. But here's the catch. You don't decide what moves your monsters make. They do. That's right, the monsters fight autonomously, and all you can do is change their tactics. Charge prompts them to do strong attacks, Mixed is for support, and Cautious is for healing and defense. Granted, there is the option to specify exactly what your monster will do, but the game frowns upon it. The command option is disabled in arena battles. Also, if you leave the selector on command, and then do something else, like say use an item instead of adjusting tactics, the monster in question will only use normal attacks. It's a real double-edged sword. On the one hand, it expedites battles considerably, which is especially nice when you're level grinding, and you'll probably be satisfied with the moves the monsters choose to make. They have a pretty good understanding of their enemies' weaknesses. But on the other hand, if you like having control over every little thing, you'll probably be underwhelmed. Still, rest assured that this is indeed a strategic game. While you may not have control over the battles, the team building is a complicated mechanic in and of itself. If you know what you're doing, pretty much every monster is accessible through breeding, and by extension, you can make monsters with whatever skills you want. The appeal of this game is planning everything out behind the scenes, then getting to watch it come to fruition again and again in battle. There exists a sequel to this game, and while I haven't actually played it, I know exactly what I'd want to see if I were to pick it up. I'd of course like for there to be more monsters, so long as they avoid the trappings of palette swaps. There were a few palette swaps in Dragon Warrior Monsters, and I was willing to overlook them, as their stats and abilities were different from one another. But if they continued down that path, I'd start to think they were cutting corners. Also, the game could do with an increase in capacities. I found myself constantly having to throw away or sell useful items because my backpack and vault were full. But it wasn't just the items that had an insufficient capacity. For collecting monsters, it was the exact same story. You can only have 19 monsters on active duty at once, and that includes eggs and the monsters in your party. But the biggest thing I'd like to see is an improved capturing mechanic. It would be nice if the player had more control over something so critical, and had more influence over the capture than just standing on the sidelines and lobbing ribs. But I certainly can't fault this game on longevity. There are dozens of different monster gates to explore, some that are unlocked by winning matches in the arena, and others that you'll find by helping out the townspeople. Even discounting the time spent level grinding, which at worst can be called a standard amount for an RPG, this game is good for hours of play. And it's far from over after the denouement and ending credits. There's still a ton of stuff left to do. So, while I can't say for sure that you'll like this game, I can tell you that it hits all the right notes for gamers of a certain niche. If you're willing to work for it, there are tons of neat rewards to be had. If you're finished with Pokemon, but still in the mood for a game with plenty of monster collection and hours of diversion, this game may be just what you're looking for. Used copies go for $15 to $20 on eBay, so if you've still got your old Game Boy Advance SP, consider dusting it off and giving Dragon Warrior Monsters a try. Till next time, this is ResettisReplicas saying peace out and happy hunting.